Joni and Daystar, and you publicly affirm their relationship as being of the Lord. Can you do that in good conscience without having talking to Lisa to get her side of the story?
I don't care. The great thing about being my age is I just don't care. I've got a good quality of life.
No one saw it coming. In the middle of a live broadcast, Pastor Jimmy Evans said something so shocking that the entire studio went silent. And Joni Lamb's face said it all. For years, rumors swirled behind the scenes, but no one dared speak them aloud. Until now. What Jimmy revealed about Joni and Daystar has viewers replaying the clip in disbelief. Was it a warning, a prophecy, or the truth the world was never meant to hear? No one in the studio saw it coming. The cameras were rolling, the lights were soft, and the mood was calm. Just another evening broadcast. Jimmy Evans sat across from Joni Lamb, speaking in his usual steady tone, the kind that always carried peace. But then, something shifted, his words slowed, his expression changed, and, for a brief second, it looked like he was fighting an invisible battle inside his chest. What came out next would leave everyone silent. In front of thousands of live viewers, Jimmy said something he had kept buried for years. He spoke about a private family meeting, one that happened long before anyone knew there was trouble inside Daystar. His voice was calm, but the truth behind it was heavy. He admitted that during that meeting, he told Jonathan Lamb to submit to his mother as if she were the voice of God. The room froze. The crew stopped moving. Even Joni didn't say a word. It was one of those moments when time itself seems to hold its breath. Jimmy didn't raise his voice. He didn't try to defend himself. He just sat there and told the truth. He said he had done it out of fear, out of a desperate need to keep the family and the ministry together after Marcus died. But even then, deep down, he knew it wasn't right. "I thought I was protecting the ministry," he said quietly, "but I was really protecting an illusion." Those words hit harder than any sermon. The truth didn't come out as anger or judgment. It came out as regret. Within minutes, the internet lit up. Viewers replayed the clip over and over again, trying to understand what they had just heard. Was it a confession? A warning? A mistake? For years, people had sensed that something was off, that behind the polished shows and smiling faces, there was pain no one dared to mention. Now, for the first time, someone had said it out loud. What made the moment so powerful wasn't the shock. It was the honesty. It was a man finally taking off the mask that ministry life had forced him to wear. He didn't accuse anyone. He didn't lash out. He just told the truth. And sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. The studio sat in silence, the air heavy and still, as if everyone knew they had just witnessed something bigger than a broadcast. It wasn't drama. It was revelation. After Marcus Lamb passed away, the heart of the Lamb family and the ministry he built began to slowly come undone. On the surface, everything still looked perfect. The lights stayed bright, the broadcast went on, and the host smiled like nothing had changed. But behind the cameras, the air felt heavy. It wasn't grief alone that filled the house. It was confusion, silence, and an ache no one wanted to name. Everyone was pretending to move forward, but it was clear that something had broken. Not just a family, but the spirit that once held it together. Jonathan Lamb tried to be the bridge. As Marcus's son, he wanted to honor his father's legacy and keep peace in the family. But every time he tried to speak honestly, it felt like he was walking into a storm. His mother, Joni, had always been strong. Strong enough to run a global ministry. Strong enough to carry herself through anything. But that strength had turned into something else. After Marcus's death, her focus shifted from unity to control. Every decision, every show, every statement went through her. And those who questioned it were quietly pushed aside. Jonathan felt it first, that quiet fear that you can't say what you really feel without paying a price. He missed how things used to be, when family dinners were filled with laughter, when faith was something shared, not managed. He saw the smiles on camera and knew they didn't match the silence at home. The more he tried to talk about it, the more distance grew between him and his mother. Calls ended in frustration, meetings turned cold, and love started to feel like a business deal. Eventually, he decided something had to change. He called for a family meeting. No producers, no cameras, no filters, just family. He wanted honesty, even if it hurt. He hoped they could finally talk about everything that had been buried under "we're fine" and "let's move on." When everyone arrived, the room was tense. The air felt thick, the kind of silence that comes before something important. Jimmy Evans was there too, hoping his presence could help keep things peaceful. Jonathan took a deep breath and began. He spoke about missing his father, about how everything felt different now. He said that they were all hurting, all lost, and that pretending wasn't healing anyone. He said the ministry was becoming more about image than truth. For a moment, there was hope that maybe this time someone would listen. But then Joni reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and opened the timer app. "You each have 60 seconds, she said flatly. At first, everyone thought she was joking. A few nervous laughs echoed around the room, but she wasn't smiling. She set the timer, looked around, and repeated, 1 minute each. That's all you get. The room went silent again, this time with disbelief. Jonathan looked at her, confused. How do you fit years of pain, confusion, and heartbreak into 60 seconds? But they followed her rule. One by one, each person spoke. Some angry, some crying, some so numb they could barely find words. When Jonathan's turn came again, he looked straight at his mother and said softly, "This isn't how family talks, Mom. You can't time forgiveness. You can't schedule healing." But she didn't respond. When the last person finished, Joni stood up, grabbed her things, and said, "You're all operating in fear." Then she walked out. No hug, no prayer, no closure. Just the sound of the door closing behind her. The silence that followed was unbearable. No one moved. Jimmy Evans sat there stunned, staring at the floor, realizing that this wasn't just a family argument. It was a collapse. Jonathan looked around the room and saw a maze filled with hurt. People who loved each other but didn't know how to fix what was broken. That meeting was supposed to bring them closer, but instead it pulled them further apart. Later that night, Jonathan sat with his wife, Susie. He was quiet for a long time before finally saying, "We can't keep pretending." She nodded. They both knew that the illusion was gone. They couldn't keep showing up for something that no longer felt real. The next day, they decided to step back. Not out of bitterness, but out of self-preservation. Staying meant lying to themselves, and they couldn't do it anymore. No one from the family called that night. No one asked why they left. It was as if they had simply been erased from the story. The house that used to be filled with joy now felt hollow. Behind the ministry's polished broadcasts, there was nothing but silence. For Jonathan and Susie, it was heartbreaking, but it was also freeing. They finally chose truth over performance. For Jimmy Evans, that day never stopped echoing in his mind. He realized he had played a part in it, not by being cruel, but by being silent. When he told Jonathan to submit to his mother as the voice of God, he thought he was keeping peace. But later, he saw that peace built on control isn't peace at all. It's fear with a pretty face. He carried that regret for years until he finally said it out loud on live TV, hoping that maybe honesty could begin to heal what silence had destroyed. The Lamb family never truly recovered from that meeting. The wounds ran too deep, and too many words had gone unsaid. What began as a moment meant for healing became the moment that exposed everything. The pain, the pride, the distance that had been growing in the shadows. And when the cameras rolled again, the world saw smiles and faith. But behind those lights, the family that had once built a global ministry was quietly falling apart. Not in one dramatic collapse, but in 1,000 small ways. Through silence, control, and the fear of facing the truth. It wasn't just a family breaking. It was the slow unraveling of trust. The kind that once lost can never truly be put back together. After the family meeting fell apart, something shifted inside Daystar. It wasn't loud or obvious at first. No public fights, no headlines, no explosions. It was quieter than that. The kind of silence that sneaks in slowly until one day you realize it's everywhere. The halls that used to echo with laughter and prayer now felt like a museum. Still, cold and full of memories no one wanted to touch. The people who worked there started to whisper less and smile more, but the smiles didn't reach their eyes. Daystar had always been built on the idea of family, on warmth, faith, and transparency. But after Marcus Lamb's death, that spirit began to fade. The more Joni tried to hold it together, the more control she seemed to need. Every show, every message, every staff decision went through her. It wasn't collaboration anymore. It was command. Questioning her choices became dangerous, not because of what she might say, but because of what she might take away. Your place, your job, your belonging. People noticed the change but didn't talk about it out loud. They had seen what happened to others who did. Longtime employees quietly disappeared. Some were reassigned. Others simply stopped showing up. When someone asked why, the answer was always the same. They felt called to move on. It became the polite way of saying they'd been silenced. The culture shifted from faith-driven to fear-driven, and no one wanted to be the next to go. Then came Doug Weiss. At first, no one thought much of him. Just another guest, another voice sharing advice on relationships and faith. But almost overnight, he was everywhere. He started showing up in meetings, on set, even in family gatherings. His presence felt strategic, not accidental. Before anyone could make sense of it, Joni announced that they were together. And not long after, they were married. It was fast, too fast, and the people closest to the ministry were stunned. Some congratulated her out of respect, others because they didn't dare do otherwise. But behind the scenes, whispers began. People wondered how someone could move on so soon after such deep loss. Others questioned why this new relationship seemed to come with so many changes. Doug wasn't just a partner, he was becoming a voice of authority. His sermons started echoing through the network, heavy on obedience, submission, and hierarchy. It matched perfectly with the new atmosphere inside Daystar, controlled, polished, and fearful. What had once been a ministry rooted in love now felt more like a kingdom ruled by silence. Employees stopped sharing ideas in meetings. Producers were told to avoid topics that might invite controversy. Viewers noticed subtle differences. The tone of the shows, the way people spoke less about community and more about order. If anyone asked about Jonathan and Susie, the response was always rehearsed. They're doing great things elsewhere, but no one really believed it. People who had been with the Lambs for decades began to leave quietly. Some went to smaller ministries. Some just couldn't take the tension anymore. Even friends like Denise Boggs tried to reach out to Joni, sending heartfelt letters pleading with her to slow down, to listen, to see what was happening. But those letters were never answered. Calls went unreturned. Doors that were once always open began to close. The sad part was that most people didn't stop believing in the mission of Daystar. They still loved what it stood for, spreading faith, hope, and healing. But they couldn't ignore what it had become. Meetings were colder now, shorter, more scripted. Every decision seemed to be about optics, about how things looked, rather than what was right. People began to walk on eggshells, choosing their words carefully, afraid that even a small disagreement could be seen as rebellion. Jimmy Evans saw it too. He had been with the network for years, preaching about marriage, forgiveness, and grace. But something felt off. He said later that walking into those meetings felt like walking through fog. Everyone pretending to be fine, but no one actually was. The ministry that once celebrated honesty now punished it. The message of truth was still being preached, but the truth itself had become unwelcome. For the viewers watching at home, nothing seemed wrong. The lights were bright, the cameras sharp, the hosts smiling as always. They talked about victory, about faith, about God's goodness. But behind the curtain, fear ruled. There were unspoken rules. Don't question leadership, don't bring up the past, don't mention the family tension. To the outside world, it looked like unity. Inside, it was control. By the time the whispers reached the public, it was too late. The culture of silence had taken over completely. People who once believed in the Lamb family began to drift away, heartbroken. They didn't want to believe the rumors, but the warmth that once drew them in was gone. The ministry had started to feel mechanical, like it was running on habit rather than heart. Even those who stayed could feel it. The weight of pretending, the exhaustion of keeping up appearances. They prayed, smiled, and worked. But the joy was gone. It had been replaced by survival. A few brave souls tried to speak up, quietly asking for change, for honesty. But they were quickly reminded of their place. Loyalty was redefined. It wasn't about standing for truth anymore. It was about staying silent for the sake of unity. And that's how the empire of silence grew, not through cruelty or malice, but through fear, pride, and the slow decay of trust. It didn't fall apart in one dramatic moment. It crumbled in whispers. People didn't walk away in anger. They drifted off in heartbreak, realizing that the place they once called home no longer felt holy. Daystar still shined on television screens, but behind the glow was emptiness, a brand surviving on image, not spirit. And the saddest part? No one needed to destroy it. The silence did that on its own. The fall didn't come all at once. There was no single explosion, no public confrontation, no dramatic ending. It came quietly, piece by piece, like a structure that looks solid on the outside while rotting from within. Daystar still shined on television, the hosts still smiled, the music still played, and the audience still tuned in. But behind those bright lights, the heart was gone. The laughter that once filled the halls had been replaced with whispers and fear. The sense of family that had built the ministry had turned into something cold and mechanical. And when the truth finally came out, it didn't just shake a network. It broke the illusion that had held it together for decades. It all started with a clip, just a few minutes long, shaky and raw. Jimmy Evans speaking live, confessing something he had held in for years. He admitted that he once told Joni Lamb to submit to his mother as if she were the voice of God. He said he thought he was helping, but now knew he had helped create something dangerous, a culture where obedience replaced truth and image replaced love. The clip spread across the internet like wildfire. People replayed it, analyzed it, argued about it. Some said Jimmy had finally spoken what others were too afraid to. Others claimed he was stirring drama, taking things out of context. But for those who had been watching closely, it confirmed what they already suspected. Something inside Daystar was deeply wrong. Within hours, social media exploded. Viewers who had supported the ministry for years began to ask questions. Old employees started quietly messaging each other, saying things like, "Did you hear it? He finally said it." For them, it wasn't a surprise. It was validation. The silence that had been choking everyone was finally breaking. But inside the ministry walls, panic set in. Staff were told not to comment, not to share, not even to mention it. Officially, there was no response. Unofficially, everyone knew the damage had been done. People who had worked there for decades started resigning quietly. Some left notes thanking the ministry for the years they had served, but anyone who read between the lines could see the pain. They weren't leaving because they wanted to. They were leaving because they couldn't breathe there anymore. Pastors who once appeared on Daystar stopped accepting invitations. Partner ministries began distancing themselves, afraid of the backlash. Donations dipped. The numbers were still large enough to look fine on paper, but behind the scenes, it was obvious. The cracks were becoming fractures. And yet, Joni kept smiling on air. Week after week, she appeared on screen, speaking about victory, healing, and perseverance. She didn't mention the controversy, didn't acknowledge the growing storm. To her, silence was control. As long as she didn't react, she believed she could contain it. But the audience could tell. Something in her tone had changed. The warmth and joy that used to flow so naturally had been replaced with stiffness. The smiles looked practiced. Even the light in her eyes, once full of conviction, seemed dimmed. People watching from home felt uneasy, even if they couldn't explain why. The show still looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. Behind the cameras, the atmosphere was worse. Staff avoided eye contact. Meetings were short, cold, and tense. Every day, someone else was gone. The people who remained were walking on eggshells, terrified that one wrong word could end their careers. No one knew who to trust. Gossip filled the spaces where laughter used to live. It wasn't a ministry anymore. It was survival. Jimmy Evans, the man whose honesty had sparked everything, was heartbroken. He hadn't meant to start a war. He had only wanted to stop pretending. But now, the truth he had spoken was burning everything that had been built on silence. Former employees began to share their stories online. Some talked about fear, others about exhaustion. They spoke of the way loyalty had been twisted, how questioning leadership was treated as rebellion, and how faith had become a word used to keep people quiet. It was never shouted. It was implied. You either obeyed or you weren't in alignment. And that kind of culture doesn't need to scream to destroy people. It just needs to whisper long enough that everyone starts believing the lie. As the weeks passed, the once loyal audience began to divide. Some defended Joni, saying she was being attacked by the enemy. Others said they couldn't ignore the signs anymore. The ministry's social media pages, once filled with prayer and praise, turned into battlegrounds of disbelief and sadness. "This can't be true," some wrote. "I trusted them." Others said, "We've been seeing this for years. It was only a matter of time." Through it all, Jonathan and Susie stayed silent. They didn't post anything, didn't go on interviews, didn't fight back. They were tired. After years of trying to make peace, they had finally accepted that you can't heal something that refuses to face the truth. They moved on quietly, focusing on their family, their faith, and their own small corner of peace. But even in their silence, people supported them. Messages poured in, thousands of them. Strangers wrote, "We see you. We believe you. You're not alone." It wasn't fame they found in the truth. It was freedom. Inside Daystar, denial became the new normal. Whenever something bad happened, a lost sponsor, a staff departure, a drop in ratings, the explanation was always the same. We're under attack. It was easier to blame outside forces than to admit what was happening inside. But even the strongest walls can't hide cracks forever. One by one, programs were cut. Production slowed. Faces that had once defined the network disappeared without explanation. The empire that had once seemed untouchable was collapsing in slow motion, and it wasn't just a professional fall. It was spiritual. The message that once gave people hope now felt hollow. The same verses used to inspire faith were being used to justify silence. The people watching could sense it. They weren't being fed. They were being managed. The trust that had been the foundation of everything was gone. And when trust dies, nothing can stand, not even faith built on decades of work. What made it all so tragic was how avoidable it was. It didn't have to end this way. The family meeting could have been a turning point. Jimmy's confession could have been the start of healing. All it would have taken was one moment of humility, one admission that things weren't okay. But pride wouldn't let that happen. Image mattered more than honesty. Control mattered more than connection. Now, years later, people still talk about what happened. Some have forgiven, others have walked away for good. The ministry still exists, but it's not the same. Not in spirit, not in purpose, not in heart. It became a warning to others that no amount of power, money, or success can protect you from the truth. In the end, Daystar didn't fall because of one big scandal or one person's mistake. It fell because of silence, the kind that kills slowly, the kind that makes good people look away when something feels wrong. And when the silence finally broke, the cost of truth was everything: relationships, reputations, faith, and the trust of millions. The lights are still on, the cameras still roll, but the magic that once filled the air is gone. Because once the truth steps into the room, it doesn't leave. It changes everything it touches. And for the Lamb family, for Jimmy Evans, and for everyone who once called Daystar home, that truth came too late to save what had already crumbled.